So if you're wondering why you need a flash, this is the shot without the flash. This is the shot with the flash. Today's home project is one of the easiest I might have ever done, but it's also one of the most satisfying. We're going to be capturing photos of smoke, but by lighting that smoke up using the flash, we're going to create these beautiful patterns. It's so fun to do, and it requires very little equipment, just your camera, a flash, and something that will actually create some smoke. So I'll start by taking you through the setup. I've got my camera locked down on a tripod. It does just make things much easier. I've got a 50mm lens on here, and I am at basically the closest focusing point. Using a 50mm rather than my 100mm macro lens just gives me a bigger space to work in. For my light, it is my Godox AD100 Pro again, and I've got it set off camera using a wireless trigger. And to show you how low tech this is, I've not even put this on a light stand. I've just stacked up some boxes, and I'm going to be just popping the light on top. So the goal for this is that I'm going to have the smoke swirling up here in the middle of the scene. And I want that light to be firing right across. So if the camera's looking this way, my light is looking that way, creating this crossroads. And that's going to give me the best effect in lighting all of that smoke up. But crucially, the angle means it's not going to be lighting my background. So as a result, I'm going to get a completely black frame with just that smoke lit up beautifully. I'm going to be using two methods to actually take the photo. I'm going to start off first of all with something super basic, just an incense stick. I'm going to light it up, blow it out, and then it's going to start creating these very thin streams of smoke. So let's talk settings. I'm going to be at f10 for this because I'm going to be maximizing the depth of field. 125th of a second, ISO 250. Now, hopefully, if I just take a quick photo, I have got, from what I can see, an entirely black frame. I start pretty much all of my lighting projects by making sure that I'm getting that black frame, because that tells me that none of this ambient light, I've got big video light off both sides here, none of this is going to be actually appearing in my shot. That means I have full control over the actual creative lighting on my subject. So that means that only this light is the one that's actually going to be captured by the camera. I am going to be manually focusing, and I'm just going to do that fairly easily by just popping my finger in basically the middle of the frame where this light is going to be hitting. So it's basically going to be here at the intersection of lens versus light. So pretty much here, and roughly making sure that's in focus. Now, when I'm actually going to be moving the smoke around, it is naturally going to kind of waft around. Some of it might be a little bit closer to the lens, some of it might be a bit further away. As a result, this focusing isn't going to be a perfect system. So it really is going to be the case that some shots are going to work, some shots aren't. So let's actually start by taking some, and we can have a look. Now, before I actually set fire to anything, let's probably just have a little bit of a safety warning. If you're going to do something like this, make sure that you're being smart. I have got fire blankets and a fire extinguisher on standby in case, but I've also made sure that there's no soft furnishings around. There's nothing that's going to be a problem here. My room is ventilated, and I'm not going to be breathing anything in for too long. I'm also using safe to breathe things, incense sticks. You'd normally have them on in a room anyway, so the smoke this is creating isn't going to be problematic. And it probably goes without saying that if you do have any problems and you do set fire to your house, it's not my fault. So, with that being said, let's light it up. Okay, let's get quite a bit of it smouldering so it creates a little bit more smoke. It's looking good. Okay, and now our smoke is coming up. So, straight away, that first image I actually really like the look of. Using the incense stick, it's quite a subtle line of smoke, so you do kind of have to move it around a little bit like this. But as you'll see, as I'm firing away, some of these shots are working, some of them I've actually got the incense stick in shot. Some of them not so much, some of them are a little bit too subtle. I think more than any other projects I've done, this one is completely trial and error as those like rings of smoke sort of develop and then disperse. So it is one that maybe start off with an empty SD card and just keep firing away. I did a little test run of this last night, and I took, I think, about 1,000 photos in about 40 minutes of shooting. Because some of the shapes aren't going to look good. Some of them are just going to be totally messy. But actually that hit and miss approach is probably one of my favorite things about doing this project, because you really have to work to get the shot. So it is really satisfying when you get one that actually does kind of stand out as a good one. And it's kind of difficult to define exactly what a good photo is with one of these. I'm trying to look for slightly more defined shapes. Sometimes you will get a really lovely curve or an S shape or a swirl or a spiral of some kind that stands out rather than just a big mess of smoke. So what I'm doing is just sort of slowly bringing it up. Oh yeah, these look nice. Actually made a little smoke ring there. Shooting on the 50 means that I've got quite a big space in which to create these smoke rings. So it makes it a little easier to actually capture them on frame. But I am shooting raw photos at full resolution, and with a 48 megapixel camera, there's a lot of room for me to crop into specific areas where I think the composition looks nicer. Yeah, some of these ones I think do look cool. There's no real technique. I'm just taking the incense stick and just swirling it around the frame. Not too fast, because you don't want to whip it through, otherwise you're not leaving that smoky trail, but just a little bit. So simple, but so beautiful. Some of these, when I create a bit of a ring with some smoke wisps coming off it, looks almost like a jellyfish with its tentacles coming out. I always like anything like this that creates these sorts of abstract shapes and patterns because they're totally open to interpretation. It may be that the ones that I'm selecting as my favorites from the bunch, someone else would look at and get absolutely nothing from, but may well find that there are some others that really stand out for different reasons. I guess in the same way as if you were lying down in the park looking up and trying to spot shapes in clouds, everyone always sees something a bit different. And I think that is exactly the same principle at play here. I actually think what I'm going to do, because the flash position doesn't really make any difference, it just needs to be very much at that axis. So I'm going to actually put it below the camera now, firing up. I'm just going to double check that my focus is still at the right point. It isn't. But we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to increase that flash power a little bit because it's slightly further away now. But otherwise, everything is the same. I really like these. I think these are fun. It's definitely one where I'm going to have a gigantic album of photos just for me to sift through. I'll probably start off by just sort of very quickly flicking through them, 5-starring ones which kind of stand out to me for whatever reason, and then going back through those images and trying to select ones that I actually think look particularly good. Some of these I'm definitely getting my hand in the shots, but I'm hoping that I can crop into the interesting part where the smoke is and not have my hand ruining the image, making these small circles, which is just helping the smoke build up a little bit more. As I say, this is just incense, so it's not particularly bad to breathe, but you still wouldn't want to be doing this for hours and hours on end. I don't smoke cigarettes, so realistically I don't breathe in a lot of smoke, so I feel that I can just breathe in a little bit of this and it's probably not going to do me too much harm. But I will be getting the windows open and ventilating the room out properly when I take a break. I'll just stub that out because I've actually got something else to use. Now I do have my Smoke Genie. Now this is a professional handheld smoke machine, churns out a lot of smoke. It's easiest probably to think of it as like a large vape. It is quite expensive, but it does do a really, really good job, particularly if you're actually doing professional shoots. But to be honest, a vape also would do the trick for this kind of photography perfectly well. So you don't need to spend the, I think, $500 or so that this costs, but it is a pretty good bit of kit for this sort of thing. So I am just going to start putting out a bit of smoke, taking the shot again. Still using the flash from below, and I think it works still. But actually, let's pop it back up here. The other thing with this smoke versus the incense is that this kind of lingers in the air a little bit. I think because it's maybe a bit more dense, so it doesn't just immediately disperse, which just gives me a little bit more flexibility to kind of put it into the scene. And like in this shot, it's actually almost started to kind of drip down in the air, as it were, which looks kind of cool. Just trying to do a small little wisp, just a little line, because what I'm looking for is these quite elegant strands. I don't want a big mess. If we do loads, then it's going to look quite messy, quite chaotic, and that can look kind of cool too. In fact, as I've done quite a lot here and it's starting to sort of disperse, it is looking quite nice. This one I actually do think looks really cool with a bit more going on. And actually, that one looks pretty cool too. But it's some of the more simple lines that I'm looking for. The great thing is, if you don't like what's happened, then you just blow it away and start again. It's quite nice. So if you're wondering why you need a flash, this is the shot without the flash. This is the shot with the flash. Well, to be honest, I'm just going to keep on firing away at this point because it really is one of those projects where the more shots you take, the more swirls you capture, the more times you have a go at actually getting your images, then the more likely it is you're going to have some images that you really, really like. But my process is basically going to carry on being exactly the same that you've seen so far. So what I'm going to do now is take you over into Lightroom and show you how I take those shots and hopefully make them look even better. So these are basically a selection of some of my favorite ones that I've taken, and you can see that it's not all the nice, simple, elegant ones. I actually do really like the look of some of these really chaotic ones. It kind of reminds me of actually putting ink in water and then watching it swirl around, and I think that's just because the smoke machine gives this much more sort of liquidy type of smoke, which I think works really well for this type of photography. But I'd say about 95% of the image is captured in camera. If I just have a look at some of these ones, this is one of my favorite ones. I just love this simple elegance of this line of smoke going up here. Now straight away I would want to do a crop, a vertical one, because it really matches the line of smoke going up, putting it something like this. And really most of it is about emphasizing the nice highlight of the line of smoke itself. So I'll probably just increase the whites. And as I pulse that up and down, you can just see what that's doing. You don't want to go too far because it goes very weird and contrasty, usually after about the plus 40 mark. So I'll keep it at around plus 30, just still quite a lot. The clarity slider, as photographers, we often stay away from it, but actually here it works so well. Just look as I start to lift that clarity up. It really brings out so much detail in the smoke. So really going to pop that up again, plus 30. And I'm also just going to increase the exposure a little bit and a bit with the highlights too. Now in this shot, there's a lot of background haze now. It's not quite true black, and we are actually able to see this object that I've got down here in the background, which wasn't able to be visible on some of the other shots. Now, I'm hoping that a lot of this I can retrieve just by pulling down the black level, which is also really going to help the smoke stand out in this frame, which it does. So if we just go before and after, you can see how much more detail we've got here. But it might be worth me kind of going into Photoshop and just cloning that area out as well, just so that it's not visible on any display. The other thing I love, this is a shot taken with the incense stick rather than the smoke machine, and it's actually got a nice blue tint to the smoke as well. And I love that color combination that we've got. There's sort of a yellowy smoke here and a bluey smoke here. And I'm sure if I increase that saturation, we see that even more. I actually really, really like how that looks. We've got a little stray smoke up here in the corner, so I might just want to get rid of that, just so that it's a slightly neater looking composition. and similarly in this top corner as well. But I think for that image, that is all that I would want to do. I obviously haven't done a very neat job here. I'd probably do that better in Photoshop, but you can see just how much difference that has made. I'm not manipulating the smoke itself. I'm not changing its shape, its dimensions. I'm not adding smoke where there isn't any. It's just about emphasizing what is already there. I think with this shot, what I particularly liked here, as I mentioned this in the video as well, the benefit of shooting at high resolution is that obviously most of this is a black frame. I didn't get my positioning quite right with the smoke, and a lot of this smoke is just messy nonsense. But here we've got this great example of the smoke jellyfish that I mentioned earlier. So I really want to try and get a version of this shot rather, that fills the frame much more with what I consider to be the actual subject of this image. And we can flip this round, and so now we've got this great jellyfish here, which I do think looks really, really cool. Otherwise though, my editing will be the same, really upping that clarity. As I do, just look at what it does to all the detail. But I actually don't necessarily want loads this time, because if I go up too much, start to lose some of that nice ethereal glow on the jellyfish, as it were. So resetting it to 0 and then just going up to maybe plus 15, just to give it that little touch of clarity, is quite nice. Again, I'm going to bring down the shadows slightly, maybe up the whites. But I think the other thing that I could do at this point is drop those blacks down as well, is take it over into Photoshop. Because what I want to try and do here is actually paint out some of the smoke around it, just so that it leaves the jellyfish by itself. It might not work super well, but I think it's worth a try. So just using the clone stamp tool, I am just going to paint away some of the smoke in these areas. I'm doing a very, very quick job. If I was doing this properly for a portfolio photo, I would want to take a lot longer over it to make sure that it actually looked half decent, but you get the idea. Just sampling from down in the bottom part of the image and then painting everything else away. And I think it kind of works. We could take this little tail off because it doesn't really add to the composition. And so now we do just have that jellyfish sort of floating in the blackness by itself. But yeah, it's okay. I might use that sort of technique for other photos, but it's nice to kind of show you as an example of what I would do. But it is a very simple editing process overall, and it's a fun one to play around with. But that brings me to an end of today's video, and I will probably just flash up on screen now some other of my favorite shots that I've taken over the few days that I've been playing with this idea. I do think it's really, really cool. I love finding these nice, elegant images, and then I love also capturing some of these more chaotic ones. I've really enjoyed giving this one a go. It's not like any other photography that I've done before, and I really hope that you've enjoyed watching it. It's such an easy setup. You can do this without having any high-end equipment, so it is a superb one just to try if maybe the weather outside isn't exactly inviting you to pick up your camera, but you still want to feel creative. But I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, then do please make sure to hit that like button, and definitely please leave me a comment if you think this is something you want to try yourself. And I will see you next time.